Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome back once again, or for the very first time, to the Farts and Crap Show, where today, as per usual, it's your host, Danjo, here with another episode of Stick Tips. Today is going to be part 22, and I'm going to be talking about something that I have talked about before here on the channel, here on this show, specifically in episodes 15 and 19. And I did mention on both of those episodes, they were basically talking about the Wingman XE from Brook. Now we have the successor to that device, the Wingman XE2, which they call a PlayStation cross-platform controller converter, which is maybe not exactly what you're thinking. But this is essentially replacing the Wingman XE, as well as, I believe they called it the Wingman NS, which was for the Nintendo Switch. The Wingman for the Switch, I think it was called the NS. This also works on the PlayStation 3 and now has button remapping and multiple types of turbo. Like, you can choose the turbo speed when before it was just like one speed for turbo. This does have an updated chip in it apparently. However, the firmware is, a lot of it is the same or similar as the Wingman XE. And if you want to get the full product details, definitely check out their homepage. URL is at the top of the screen right here. And yeah, this thing is compatible with over 125 controllers. Very, very wide swath of compatibility. The list of supported controllers is not complete, however. There are some omissions on there and some where it's not entirely clear which one they mean, and I'll get to that here in a minute. With specifically the two that I've been using the most. However, if it is an Xbox controller, it's very likely to work on here. It's compatible with a good amount of Switch controllers as well. Some wireless only, or some wired only, some wireless only. It depends on the make and model, and you're going to have to pretty much experiment to see if it's going to work for your desired controller. And considering the cost of the DualSense controllers nowadays, with 70 being like both the MSRP but also like a good price, yeah, getting one converter for 45 that can work with like tons of different controllers is much more attractive, especially when replacing a DualSense is so expensive. Even if you're just going for a DualShock 4, they still haven't like dropped in price like I was assuming they would after the PS5 became more readily available. We got further into the life cycle of the system. DualShock 4's new are still about $60, so not really that great of a deal. And just, I've talked to a lot of people where the DualShock 4 was more comfortable, in their opinion, than the DualSense. And it wasn't the best on battery life, but it's still better than the DualSense's abysmal battery life of like, based on my own testing and talking to other PS5 owners, roughly about 2.5 to 3 hours, sometimes more than that. It honestly depends on the type of, it depends on the game that you're playing on the PlayStation, because I have noticed on certain titles, I think it's almost always PS5 games, they can last longer than 3 hours, but it's very rare. Now, this compared to, I think, what is still the best battery life video game controller, the Nintendo Wii U Pro controller at 80 hours. Yeah, it's it's pretty pathetic. Even the Switch Pro controller gets like 60, I think. So, yeah, so if you guys are watching this in the future and there is a firmware update past the current firmware, which is at the time of recording version 1.14, this is the URL you use to go to Brooke's website and find those firmware downloads. The Wingman XE2 last got updated in the middle of March of 2023. The device only came out in like mid to late February, so within a month we had a firmware update, like addressing some issues, not really adding some compatibility, but adding some features. The Wingman XE is currently on version 1.4G. That was updated in November of 2022, and I doubt it's going to get another update. I was kind of hoping with this first update it would also come to the XE, but that didn't happen. So it could be that only the XE2 is going to get the updates in the future, which wouldn't be surprising. And for me, that was kind of already a good enough selling point to where this device that I use all the time, there's a new version with new / better features, updated stuff, blah blah blah. And yes, it doesn't have full PS5 compatibility yet with PS5 games. It works on the PS5 system if you're playing PS4 titles. But for now, we don't have any full PS5 compatibility. As far as what I've heard, it is something that is being worked on and will likely come to this device in the future, but we'll see. For now, I think it's very much worth it for the things that are improved over the previous version. And that it brings me to my two main nitpicks that I had and mentioned in previous episodes and streams where I'm using it and stuff like that. One is the original XE had pretty large, fairly noticeable inner dead zones on the analog sticks, and that was never really addressed. The other thing is there was this like glitch that can happen where every so often you get a ghost up input on the D-pad, even when the controller's just like sitting off to the side and you're not having any inputs whatsoever. Not sure why that happened. And as far as my testing goes with the XE2, that can still happen, but it's only when the controller is inactive for a long period of time. Personally, it's not nearly as prominent as it used to be, and it took me a lot of like very acute paying attention for long periods of time, letting games idle, to where I even noticed for sure it was happening in the first place. So yeah, it's better. And the analog stick dead zone thing, that has been massively improved. It's, and I'll show in my testing here in a second, but yeah, both of those main issues completely better, 100%. Now this is what I'm using right now and what I have been using for quite some time, on quite a few games that I've been recording for series here on this channel, mainly for my FromSoft games, like Dark Souls, Elden Ring, that kind of thing, Sekiro, Bloodborne. These guys, the PDP Face-Off Deluxe Plus, now known as the PDP Rematch for Switch, they're kind of my favorite because A, they're affordable, B, they're very durable, C, they're highly customizable, and some variation of this controller we've got like multiple times in the past, and even for one of them I almost literally tried to break it. Like I tried to wear it down. I was very not nice to the analog sticks, which is counterintuitive for me. And they held up very, very well. And I mean, these controllers are way cheaper, especially, and I think it's an especially good deal if you are a Switch owner that also plays on PlayStation. Because, yes, the adapter does work on Switch as well, but I like having my controllers that are like native to one platform, but I can use them on another platform, if that makes sense. And these controllers are not on the compatibility list. However, they were added to the compatibility list for the Wingman XE. And it seems like if it was compatible with the previous version, just the regular XE, it's going to be compatible with the XE2. But they didn't put all of the things that are compatible with the XE on the list for the XE2. So I think the reason being there was just a lot of controllers on that list, and they haven't gone through to make sure every single thing is still working properly on that. So I would put the compatibility closer to 150 than 125. But I don't know. There's tons of different controllers out there. So, but yeah, personally, some of these models too, the face-off controllers, like the face-off line, I guess is a way to put it. They got their name because you can easily swap out the faceplates, and the analog sticks and the friction rings. And now on the rematches, I believe the D-pad shells as well. You couldn't do that on these ones, like before the rematch, you couldn't swap out the D-pad. But you can on the newer ones, so that's pretty great in my opinion. The other one I like to use on the adapter is the 8BitDo Pro 2 wired controller for Xbox. The regular Pro 2 wired controller, the one that is compatible with like Switch and Windows, and I think also Mac OS, does not work with this adapter. To reiterate, that one does not work with this one. However, the 8BitDo Pro 2 is on the compatibility list. I believe what they mean is the Pro 2 Bluetooth controller, because that is, when it's a wired controller, sometimes they specify the wired one, so it's a little confusing there. Partly, that's partly Brooks bad, that's partly 8BitDo's bad for having confusing names for things and whatnot. And of course, if something has a really long title, you're not going to put the entire thing on there. Like 8BitDo Pro wired controller for Xbox Series X, Series S, Xbox One, and Windows 10, you're not going to put that whole thing on there when you can just call it the 8BitDo Pro 2 wired controller for Xbox. Done. Because that's basically what it is. However, the main reason I use the PDP one over the 8BitDo one on specific games is because the amount of travel on the analog sticks, the range or amount of travel on these ones is lesser than the PDP controller. And that comes into play on certain games where you have one action assigned to like a slight input on the analog stick, and then like a walk, for example, and then you have like a run if you're past like 30%, somewhere between the 30% and 90%, or I guess 100 on the analog stick. So making those feel distinct is something that's harder to do with an analog stick that has less travel. For example, the Switch Joy-Cons. They're a different kind of analog stick. They have a lot shorter travel. Part of that is because of the form factor of the controller. And that can come into play in both good ways and bad ways. So, but when you want precision, typically you want something that has a slightly larger range of travel for the analog stick. So, again, it depends what the game is that you're playing. Some of them handle analog inputs differently than others. Some games actually let you customize that a little bit, and some don't. Even if there's like a custom button mapping option, it's still not an option. Now, point for this controller that is very, very helpful is that you can still do the customizing in the Ultimate software from 8BitDo. Then those options are accessible with the adapter. Like, press the button on the bottom right, which is usually the home button on the other versions of these controllers. But on this version, it will light up essentially and be your profile. So the custom profile that you set up in the software, you can still access that. Now, unfortunately, you can't customize, as far as I know, the back paddles on this. On the fly, you have to do that in the software. So that is a point in PDP's favor, because it has a program button on the controller. You don't need any kind of software to do that. You can do it with the hardware and change what your back pedals are actually doing. So it's just different. So for certain games, I definitely prefer this one, especially if it needs a solid D-pad, because the D-pad on this controller is rock solid. The PDP controller is great. D-pad, not as good. It's partially because of the placement. It's partially just because 8BitDo has been refining their D-pads for a very long time. And yeah, that's pretty much gonna do it. So I think I covered the things I wanted to talk about, the preferred controllers, blah blah. Oh yeah, since the adapter has only been out for a month, it is undoubtedly going to get a lot more updates in the near future. And just going forward, I would recommend this one over the Wingman XE, just because it's a bit more future-proofed, it's a bit more improved. The XE, just the first one, I did recommend to a lot of people, because personally it was something I was using pretty much every time I was using my PlayStation. So, yeah, let's go ahead and get to the gameplay. For this test, for this demonstration, I did want to go with something I'm very, very familiar with as a PS4 game on PS5, that being Elden Ring. It is actually now my most played PS4 game. Like, I've put more time into it than any other PS4 game. So, and I should put an asterisk there, but essentially, yeah. Now, a couple other things, real quick. One thing I guess I wanted to point out at the site of grace before I get moving. The thing I said about the analog stick dead zones, it's very, very noticeable when you're doing things like this, where you want a very slow pan, or if you're used to... I mean, I think it comes into play mostly people that are used to playing precision games, maybe like FPS, flight games, Souls games, that kind of thing. And they are very accustomed to slight analog inputs, because this kind of thing wasn't even really possible on the XE, because those giant artificial inner dead zones on the analog sticks. And so I very, very much appreciate this, because again, I try to be careful with my analog sticks, and it's kind of annoying knowing that you have a large inner dead zone that has no purpose. Um, the other thing, like I was saying, about slightly tilting the left stick, right, for movement, and then you have your walk, and then a bit more, and then you have your run. That is integral to this game and other Souls games, where literally, if you accidentally run when you're trying to walk, or vice versa, you're gonna have a bad time. Like, it's not gonna work out. And, is that what I think it was? Yeah, it was. Golden Rune. And just overall, like, again, I'm using a wired controller right now. Like, both of the controllers I was talking about earlier are wired. They're both controllers I use frequently. And, yeah, I'm not going to do this right now. And typically in the past, anytime you're using an adapter on any platform, you're going to have a... typically you're going to have a decent amount, like a noticeable amount of latency. And like in any computerized system, you're going to have latency. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, even trying to reduce it in every way possible, there's still going to be latency. However, I got so used to playing on the XE, like on my PS5, on my PS4 Pro, on the PS3, like, there is no perceivable latency. Like, it's... I mean, hopefully that's the idea, right? Use a wired controller to remove latency as much as, you know, possible, essentially. And yeah, it does. It really does. The only other thing I can think of that isn't here, but I would like to be, as far as like functionality goes, things that, you know, work as expected and blah blah blah. The XE did not have any kind of functionality for controllers with headphone jacks. Like, if it had one, it just wouldn't function at all. The adapter, I think that's still true. I haven't tested that out too much, but again, like, most things are functioning exactly as they did on the XE. But yeah, it's very early in the life cycle of this device. Honestly, I think this is just like my new go-to, if possible. It's going to be interesting seeing how they update it in the future, and also, will any of those updates come to the original XE? I don't know. Considering we already have the first update to the XE2 and the XE didn't get anything, I don't expect the original XE to get any more firmware updates, personally. I am excited and hopeful about the eventual PS5 compatibility coming to it, because yes, having it for PS4 games on PS5, that is nice. But I'm really hoping I can use this for PS5 games on PS5. Because yeah, that's literally the only reason I have my dual senses for those games where it's like, okay, well, this is a PS5 game, gotta use a PS5 controller. And hopefully we'll see more options from other companies, like the within the price range, not like pro controller you're gonna spend $200 on this thing, but something kind of like how we got with the PS4 generation, where we had the Nacon options, we had Hori options. Uh, there were other options for officially licensed PS4 controllers, and some of them were very reasonably priced. In some situations, they were a cheaper, higher quality option than the DualShock 4, in my opinion. So, hopefully, we'll see more of that in this generation, but time will tell. And if we don't, then, you know, all we really need is that PS5 compatibility with this adapter, and it'll be gold. It'll be. I won't have to put an asterisk next to my recommendation for PS5 owners. So, anyway, that's gonna do it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for stopping in. We'd like to keep these to less than half an hour, so yeah, before we get going, a very special thank you going out to the current Farts and Crap Show members, which at the time of recording is Novalis Draconis. But if you want to be incredibly awesome, support the show a bit more directly, and get in on those membership benefits like Novalis Draconis, check out the join button down below. Tiers start at $3 a month. That's only 10 cents a day. Gets you into all the basic stuff, including getting to vote on the series that get made here on this channel. Except for stick tips, this is always going to be a segment I will occasionally add to. So, yeah. Till next time, guys. Take care, and I hope you all have a beautiful day.